What possesses you to go back into the light for what haunted you in the past?
You know, I was never given a fair opportunity to tell my story. I left sports. By left sports, I mean I was blackballed. People told me in 2010 I wasn't a good enough victim. They're like, you're not the right martyr for this cause. So then when Me Too happened, I just felt so left behind, and I felt like my story wasn't told. I was like, what about what happened to me? And I think there's so many people out there, men and women, that can relate to feeling left behind, not being believed when terrible things have happened to them. Revisiting this, I really feel like is just part of reclaiming my story.
I'm just praying, I don't fight, I just pray. I only go the way of mistake.
That's lovely, George. I love it. For a real gift to be around.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That's a very good question.
I love you guys.
You've given me something to think about.
Going for a lot of outlets.
Hey, before we get started, have you ever wanted to have a conversation with Belle and I? I know a lot of people have been emailing us at the Heart of David and saying, man, if there's anything I could do to have a conversation with George, I'd love to. So we put our heads together, and this month alone, whoever purchases something from theheartofdavid.co is entered in a giveaway where we could fly you out and come and hang out with us for an hour and just chop it up the way we do with all of our incredible guests. All you got to do is go to theheartofdavid.co and check out the amazing new drop that we have. I love you guys, and enjoy today's show. Welcome back, guys. We have a great episode. Jenn Sterger. Before we even get started on your whole life that just probably got hit like crazy.
It's been a fun week.
A documentary dropped about Brett Favre.
Mm-hmm. The Fall of Favre on Netflix.
The Fall of Favre. Mm-hmm. Very strong title. I watched the documentary. But before I jump into that, I kind of wanted to give the audience my perspective of you.
I love that.
Because, dog, I did not know about any of this.
You were like, wait, what? I know this girl.
Yo, when Enrique called me, he goes, yo, you want in on this? And I was like, what do you mean? And I was like, what, is she going through something right now? Dog, you were going through things in the late 90s.
Hey, don't age me like that. It was the mid-2000s, bro. He just made me like 60.
I was like, this girl was going through it, and I was in diapers, dog. No, okay, so my POV of Jenn is like, Jenn, and I really mean this, I'm not just gassing you up. You're one of the sweetest girls I've ever got the pleasure of working with. You're really funny. That. You're a great comic. You go and you hang out with people. You're not... you know, like Debbie Downers. Like sometimes people bring bad energy around. You always have great energy. You never talk bad about people. So I watched this documentary, dog. I was like, yo, I can't wait to get the scoop on what's going on.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so funny because I watch, you know, you guys, all these influencers now, and it's like, people don't realize, like, I was one of the OGs when it came to that stuff. Like, again,
you're the first
were young.
influencer.
I was one of the first influencers.
When
you couldn't make any money off of it, which is why I'm in the position that I'm in.
Thank you for that. You were the real pioneer.
Listen, I walked so you could run, okay?
Oh, damn, that's so funny.
But it's true. Like, it's so funny. You probably laughed really hard at the part of the documentary where they were like, she's the most popular college co-ed with over 4,000 friends on Facebook. And I just spit out my water. I was like, E! News said that like it was such a milestone.
It was a flex. But back in the day, that was.
But it was. Truly it was. And it's funny because when you could go viral in the early 2000s, and like, again, this is the early stages of Facebook. You had to have an EDU, like a college email address, just to be on the platform. Your parents couldn't be on it, thank God. I would never have been invited to holidays. But, you know, like, it was a totally different time. And when you got passed around, when you went viral, you were literally being pushed around by people. You didn't have to worry about an algorithm. So it was a totally different landscape in terms of like being one of the first influencers. Like you were being shared by real people in real time.
That's cool, but I want to know exactly what was, because I'm watching it, and I know it was an article where everybody was calling your dad, and they were sending you calls and be like, yo, I think I saw you at the game. But what was it that like made the whole thing pop to the point where like, oh, that's Jenn?
So I feel like I'm giving you a history lesson.
I would love to. And by the way, you technically are, Dan.
Thanks. Back in the days of the internet.
And by the way, you look the same, dog. When I was watching the documentary and I was like, dog, she has an... Are you a vampire, dog? What do you...
No, you know what it is? I don't drink.
Oh, well.
I don't drink and I don't party. I don't drink and I don't party. I don't do drugs. You know what I mean? Like, I live a sober lifestyle now, and at least since 2009. And I just feel so much better because of it, you know? Like,
yeah, you're sharper.
I'm sharper. My life's clear. I feel like I have so much better control over my feelings, you know? But the added bonus is you can get in really good shape. You know what I mean? But yeah, like the early days. So I got discovered at a football game.
Yeah.
The same way this other woman did. You may have heard of her, Pamela Anderson.
Yeah, nice.
That's true.
Where you were bartending and then you got your shirt wet and then...
someone spilled something on me at a tailgate. I was bartending during the day, went to a tailgate immediately after work, got something spilt on me because everybody else had been partying all day while I was working. And I was like, I can't miss the game. I can't miss kickoff. So I just wore a bathing suit top to the football game. And I had really great seats. And it was a big rivalry game. It was a Monday night game. And it was Miami Hurricanes versus the Florida State Seminoles. And I kind of started getting the vibe that I was on camera because I started getting some texts. Again, this is when we had phones that you have flipped them open.
I still have those.
Oh, you do?
I have a flip phone.
You would.
Yeah.
But now it's like, look how retro and cool I am. It's like, you have no idea how
No, it's
easy
just I'm
you
an
had it.
iPad kid, dude. I had to get off. It was so bad.
Oh, so it's more of just a get away from the distractions kind of
100%.
thing. Yeah, now you see how bored we were.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, it was. I just opened it up and I'm like, oh yeah, there's nothing. Until I close it.
Isn't it great?
Yeah, it really is. It's a lot freeing. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
So you're there?
not at all. So I was at the football game and I started getting texts from people and they're like, I think I saw you on television. And then other people started texting me and then people started texting my dad. And then, so I knew I was on television. But then the next day, these message boards started passing around my pictures and they were like, hey, who is this girl? We have to figure out who this girl is. And the internet finds you very quickly, you know, if you have any kind of footprint. And I had just gotten a Facebook, like right before this, because I needed to flex on an ex, because I was like, he had broken up with me, and I was like, but look how hot my new pictures are. So this was the biggest flex, right?
You're
the
like, look, I'm
flex.
circulating. Look at me.
Your girl's going viral. Yeah. No, and it's so funny because, again, this is back in the early 2000s. This is 2005. And this was the days of Maxim and Playboy and all FHM, all those men's magazines. So my ex-boyfriend had all these pictures of women up on his walls, and like, I would just be, you know, like you're over at you're trying to stay at their place and you're just staring at another woman's butthole. You know what I mean? Like, but there's some level of you that's like, oh man, like I want to be that hot. I want to be that attractive. Like I want to be that girl. And it's almost like not to sound like a LA girl, but like I manifested this. And so, I don't know, I just never felt like I was one of those girls. Because they show it in the documentary, like all through high school, I was like a nerd. I was like the kid that didn't fit in. I was like this awkward, you know, band dork, for lack of a better word. And college, when I went away to college, it was kind of like this chance to reinvent myself. You know, high school was so hard for me. I got bullied constantly. Again, just for being a little socially awkward and not necessarily understanding, you know, social rules all that well. I talk about it a lot on stage now just because I think a lot of it had to do with, you know, being late diagnosed, like ADHD and things like that. And now that I know what it was, I was like, oh, it wasn't me being weird. It was medical.
That's me.
Exactly, for
Red
sure.
dice for one, please.
For sure,
Seriously.
you know? But it's like, when you get that new piece of information, it's like suddenly the rest of your life makes a lot more sense, because until then, you just think there's something wrong with you.
That's a big thing you said, by the way. That's a very big thing, because I feel that. I didn't know I was dyslexic, so I just wrote myself off as stupid.
Yeah, I think the best way we should, I tell this all the time, I think the best way to diagnose it is peer review.
Yeah, right.
You have it. Just in case you were wondering. You have it. No, but it's
Did
serious.
everybody raise your hand?
It's so funny, because while I was going through the testing process, you know, I write for a bunch of other comics, and I was sitting with one of my other clients, and I was like, yeah, they're testing me for this, and my client just goes, oh, you for sure have it.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck you, Julie. Like, what? You know? But yeah, it's been an eye-opening experience going through all that now. And again, college was just this chance to reinvent myself. And so when I finally became a quote unquote popular girl, I just thought I'd fooled everybody, you know? And essentially I had, you know, because I showed people a version of myself that was more of like a wrestling gimmick, you know, like a character.
It's a mask.
Yeah, it was a mask. It's the exact word for it, you know?
This video is sponsored by BetterHelp. At a certain point in life, I feel like everybody deals with some mental problems, and I think it's very healthy to find a coach in it. If an athlete needs a coach to better himself in a sport, and somebody needs a sharper mind, needs somebody to maybe walk them through their problems. Recently in a survey, 26% of people said that they avoided getting help for their mental because they were worried about being judged. This Mental Health Awareness Month, we should really try to push that narrative out and be done with it. Tell your neighbor and your friend that it's okay to get help. When people avoid getting help when it comes to their mental, it doesn't just sabotage yourself, it actually ruins the environment with friends, family, and workers. A lot of people think that you just need a therapist if you have trauma, and that's further from the truth. It also can help you set boundaries, learn coping skills to deal with obstacles that you have in your life. All in all, it's supposed to help you be a better version of who you are. BetterHelp is completely online, making it affordable and very convenient. They've helped over 5 million people worldwide. We're all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/Janko to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Janko. Now back to the show.
So how did you go from, so you're at the football games, right? And then now you're on the newspaper, your photos circulating around.
Yeah.
Did you and your friends like decide to keep going to the games to be there to support, to get photos before you got the call from Sports Illustrated?
That's such a good question. It's so funny because, so everyone, when the photos first started circulating, people were like, she doesn't even go here. Like, that's literally what they were saying.
So funny.
Someone accused me of being a stripper that had just gotten tickets to the game.
No way.
And so I was like, I'm actually a student. I'm a criminology. So I got on the message boards and I engaged with these people. Which, looking back now,
So you're podcasting too, bro?
in the troll culture that we live in, was insane for me to do. But I got on these message boards and I was like, you know what? I'm a criminology, psychology double major. My name's Jen, and I'm going to show up in the same place next week and prove to you that I do go to the school. Because I didn't go to class looking like that.
Yeah.
And I think I talk about it in the documentary. I'd go to class in pajamas, no makeup. Like, I was not the girl that got ready to go to school, you know, like all of the girls that I was in class with. So when people figured out who I was, they were just like,
That's hilarious.
seriously?
They're like, why don't you dress like this to class?
Really?
That's so funny.
You made bio way more fun.
Yeah.
So, okay, now you're in school to study for criminal. You're also going to the games. You just got out of a breakup. You're putting on this new persona. Also, you're like, you're at the time of age where you're finding yourself. You're an adult now. You're kind of living
Dude,
your...
I think I found myself 2 years ago. I think I found myself in my divorce. I don't think I really knew who I was, honestly, until 2020. And I think a lot of us were so isolated during the pandemic that a lot of us turned to like inner work because all of the noise from the outside world stopped. Like, you can only make so many loaves of bread. You know what I mean? Like, you can only you can only do so many TikTok dances before you were like, I'm having an existential crisis, you know?
Yeah.
And
So funny.
as a millennial, we'd already gone through so many like, how many life-defining events can we go through as a millennial, you know? And so I think in 2020, like, I really dove into like the deeper work, and because I had so much trouble reconciling the different parts of me. And then again, going through this whole process with like getting diagnosed and things like that, it just kind of brought everything into focus. It was like the last piece I was missing, you know? So yeah, I don't think I was finding myself. I think I was finding a version of myself that made people around me happy.
So after you find yourself and you're in a better place, you're sober, you're quick, you're telling jokes, you're writing for other people, what possesses you to go back into the light for what haunted you in the past?
You know, I think that I was never given a fair opportunity to tell my story.
Fair.
And that's something that people don't realize this. Like, I left sports, and by left sports, I mean I was blackballed in 2010, 2011. But since then, you know, I pivoted into comedy. I teach classes at sports media at university, like major universities. And so I've been talking about this for a long time. I just think now we're at a place where, you know, with the welfare scandal coming to light a few years ago, where people are actually like, oh, there may have been something to this girl's story, and we discounted her,
Yeah.
you know? And I think it comes down to, like, people told me in 2010 I wasn't a good enough victim. Like, they're like, you're not the right martyr for this cause. So then when Me Too happened, I just felt so left behind. And I felt like my story wasn't told. I was like, what about what happened to me? You know? Yeah. And I think there's so many people out there, men and women, that can relate to feeling left behind and not being believed when terrible things have happened to them. And so revisiting this, I really feel like is just part of reclaiming my story, you know, and look, I've been approached by so many filmmakers in the past, God, I'd say 5 years, where everybody was like, we should make this documentary. We should make this documentary. No lie, I actually got approached by one of Mr. Beast's old guys.
Hilarious.
And it was like, I think we should tell your story. And I was like, I feel like I'm going to end up trapped in like a haunted house with Brett Favre. Like, and he'd be like, no, we're going to gamify it. We're going to gamify it. And it was like, so truly, I had to find the right producer that understood my story, that understood that I was tired of publicly slitting my wrist for people to be believed.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want my story told right. Because every other time I was told my story would be told right, it was really to just service whatever the story was they wanted to write.
Yeah.
Whatever the journalist angle was, you know, whatever
It was
their
a profit
agenda.
for them.
Yeah, it was whatever their agenda was in accomplishing in the article they were writing.
That gentleman that leaked your access when you didn't even want to talk about it,
was
and he
rough.
says there's 2 dirtbags in the story,
Yeah.
Brett and me. That guy needs to be taken care of. Like, that's not an okay thing. As a journalist, that's very wrong. As a human being, that's very wrong. And as a friend, that's very wrong. Have you
So-
ever wanted to take legal approaches for that?
So here's the thing. As wrong as what AJ did to me was, he is still the only person in this entire scenario that has ever offered me an apology.
Oh, okay.
And I have a really funny story about it. Like I was telling you guys when I got here, I used to run a nonprofit animal rescue. And one day, I found these puppies in the desert, these 3 like golden retriever lab mixes. And I posted them on the internet and I was like, hey, I'm looking for fosters or forever homes for these dogs. And Kat Denning saw it from 2 Broke Girls and she shared my post. And I got contacted by this amazing writer, Julianne Smolinski. And she was like, oh my God, my family and I would love to bring in one of these dogs if you're still looking for homes for them. And so I wrote them back because I was like the lead on these animals. And within a few moments, I got an email from AJ. And he said, hi, I don't know whether or not you are aware of this. He's like, but the woman you've been emailing about this dog is actually my fiance.
No way.
And he's like, and I didn't want you to show up at my house and be greeted by a ghost. Yeah. So he goes, I understand, you know, if you don't think that we'd be a good home for this dog or you have no interest in working with me. He said, but I just need you to know that if I never get to say this to your face, I'm incredibly sorry for what I did to you. And I thought about it and I responded back, you know, our past has nothing to do with whether or not you'd be a good home for this animal. So I'll be by in the next few days with the dog. Mm-hmm. And so I went over there and people, you know, asked me why I did it. And I think it's really just because they discuss in the documentary, I'd never met AJ in person. To him, I was just a picture. Mm-hmm. I was a picture. I was a work colleague. I was a source to him, but he never met me. And when I dropped this dog off, you know, covered in dust from the desert and in gym clothes, not far off from what I look like right now, honestly.
Please.
But no makeup. You know what I mean? I was just a person, you know, bringing this dog to his family that would be a potential new family member. And we didn't really say anything to each other that day. Like his you know, fiance, his wife handled everything at the time. And we watched the dog interact with this kid because these dogs have been raised by kids in the desert. And so they were really leery of adults, but they loved children. And so I was like, this is the perfect family for this dog. And so I left the dog there with them. They ended up adopting it. Its name's Nesta. It's a great story. But AJ wrote me a couple weeks later and just said, I just wanted to let you know Nesta's doing amazing. And we are so grateful that you gave our family this opportunity. I know I didn't say anything to you while you were here, but he's like, I just genuinely didn't know what to say to you when I was face to face with you. And so he said, if it's okay with you, I'd love an opportunity to sit down with you and talk about it. Like talk about everything that happened. And so I asked my lawyer and he said no. So I did it anyway. And honestly, it was it was just one of those conversations that I feel like gave me so much closure and healing, because I was like, I finally felt seen. Because as you said, you know, like, he should get what's coming to him. And the truth is, he already had. Because a few years prior to that, AJ was involved in a major lawsuit because he released someone else's stuff. And that person was Hulk Hogan. And so remember the big Hulk Hogan trial that happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, so AJ had been sued by Hulk Hogan, and his website had been sued by Hulk Hogan, and he had lost everything. And, you know, he, you know, admittedly himself had acted in ways that made him seem like, you know, that he was, you know, an angry person, a bad person, if you want to just label someone like that. But I think in sitting down with him, I've realized, you know, especially because AJ has gone through sobriety, and I don't know if you guys know about the program, but like one of the steps of sobriety
Yeah, you call.
is calling up people and being like, hey,
Sorry,
I'm
man.
sorry, man.
I was messed up, dude.
They make you make a list. You know?
I think the reason why they do that is because there's a form of peace when you confess. When you let it go, you're no longer hitting the bottle to suppress the pain that you have. Because I think he knew subconsciously, even when he was in the mud of it,
sure.
he knew what he was doing is wrong.
He says that. He's like, I knew I was being a terrible person. He's like, but I was so caught up in drugs and alcohol and just working this miserable job, you know, where I felt like I was destroying people's lives, but it was just like, you know, the dollar, you know?
You gotta do what you gotta do. Like, he was just like, career first, people's feelings down
I
the
think
list, right?
this is also back in the day when there were a lot of, you know, blogs were a big deal, and blogs were held to a different standard of journalistic integrity. So in his mind, he hadn't done anything wrong because he had rationalized that to himself. Now, if you ask him, I think he's taken a different approach to it, you know, but I think so many people ask me, like, how can you give this person grace? And it's like, you give people grace because it helps you move on.
Amen.
And it helps you heal, you know? And I always think when I'm, you know, extending grace to someone, like, well, that's what I would want someone to do for me.
Amen, yeah.
You know? Because look, at the beginning of my story, I appeared a certain way. Like I said, I played the game. I became one of those Maxim and FHM models. I posed for Maxim. I posed for Playboy. I did all of the things. And when people look at me, they're like, well, you did those things, so I can't have sympathy for you. Like, you did those things, so you deserve what happened to you, you know? And I think we should be allowed to make mistakes. I think we should allowed to go, hey, you know, if I had to do it all over again, would I do that? No.
Well, I agree and I disagree, because even if they might have a visual of like, hey, that's wrong, but still, even if you think somebody's doing something wrong, they still deserve respect and integrity, regardless of what it is. So if you were doing Maxim or Playboy or anything right now, I still think nobody should approach you and talk to you the way that you were talked to. But you did this documentary to tell your side of the story, and I want to get into that. I want to learn your perspective, and I would like to like walk by and like step by step kind of just see it from your perspective now that you have the opportunity to say that stuff.
Sure.
So when did you start actually taking it as a career? So you're in college and now you have the opportunity. Was the Jets the first time they gave you? So what was your first opportunity?
My first opportunity was I got approached to write an article about what had happened to me and like becoming a viral college student by Sports Illustrated. And
Where were you when you found that out?
where? I was still in college.
That's cool.
I was a junior in college. And
So there's no such thing as influencing at the time.
no,
So you're just like kind of going into a path that doesn't exist.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, there was no blueprint for this at all. You know, it was more just celebrity and variations of celebrity, but like we didn't have the word influencer for it at the time. You know, so I got hired, and as I say it now, I got hired as an influencer for hire for Sports Illustrated, and I was one of the first people to do online video. Like I was one of the first people to do YouTube. The issue was I was doing YouTube for someone else under their channel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not like I was building something of my own. I was being used as a a host for a bigger entity like Sports Illustrated. So I worked for Sports Illustrated, and I got to travel to all these different college campuses and show people like why every college campus was great. And it was so awesome. It was like being in college with none of the homework.
Sick.
Did you love it? Like, what was the first thing? Like, what did you tell your friends? What did you tell your family?
You know, my family still doesn't think I have a job. Like, I'm like, how does your family feel? You know what I mean? When they're like, he does this thing. Like,
No,
but when it was happening in the beginning, what did they say?
My parents just knew that I had to be an entertainer, or it was done for me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they were supportive as much as possible. So I got lucky on that front. But
That's
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah.
But your friend's not stoked? Like, you were working for, Sports Illustrated. Like, as a girl, you're like been dreaming of, you were in your ex's room and you're like, I want to be one of those girls on that wall.
No, it was so funny though, because after Playboy came out, he was just like, oh man, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, exactly. And again, like, I look back at that opportunity and I'm like, oh, it wasn't the greatest opportunity in the world doing Playboy.
Sometimes when you get caught up in I can imagine you're in a brand new lane. There's no like blueprint. You have no guidance.
Guidance.
Yeah, you're seeing that like, okay, well, this is what kind of these girls did to go. I don't want to do that, but if I have to do that to get to here, then it's not that big of a deal. Like, so you start taking these approaches from a sideline. Somebody could always make a comment, but when they're in the position, it's very hard to
That's
judge
life
somebody.
in general, dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's so easy to comment from the passenger seat. It's way different when you're the one behind the wheel making split decisions. You know what I mean?
I love that you're graceful about everything. Like, I love that you're so forgiving for even Brett. Like, you watched the documentary, came out being like, wait, am I sad? Do I feel for him? And then also this guy issues an apology via email, and like you're still like able to accept it. Why are you not going back into the field that they kicked you out of? Like, why are you not getting up there and be like, you guys kicked me out of the sport, but like, I'm here and I'm here to stay. I have my own audience. I'm funny.
You
know
know
what I mean? Like,
George, I think it comes down, someone said this to me the other day, and they were like, why don't you want to work in sports anymore? And I said, they were like, what did you like about working in sports? And I said, asking me what I liked about working in sports is like asking me what I liked about my most abusive boyfriend.
yeah.
You know, I was like, because I don't have, aside from the actual games and the experiences, there was so much dirty stuff going on there that it just didn't sit well with me as the kind of person that I am. And someone told me the other day, they're like, Jen, it's really hard. Like, no one wants a squeaky clean person in the room because they're going to call out unless they're squeaky clean themselves, because they're going to call everything out.
Yeah.
And he goes, and that's the problem with you, is he goes, you don't have a filter, and you'll just be like, hey, look at this thing that's happening. Like, do you guys see this thing? And he goes, and the hard part for you is, he goes, you basically got gaslit by your own industry. Yeah. And that's what the whole documentary shows.
But does that not intrigue you enough to say like, no, I'm going to go back in here, and if I'm going to be squeaky clean, I'm going to clean you guys out. So that way there's another Jen that's following in my footsteps. She doesn't need to be harassed into doing things she doesn't want to do.
I think I'm kind of doing that in a way, but
For
through
comedy.
like the back door, you know, no, just in sports too, by going and teaching sports media, I go and I speak to the next generation, and I tell them what happened to me, and I show them how I was betrayed by, the person that was writing the story. And I show them the mistreatment from the leagues, and I show them that, hey, sports media is a sham. Sports media is literal fake news. It is just propaganda for the leagues. It's just to service the leagues and make them money and push the narrative that these big businesses want them to. And I'm like, I truly believe that this next generation can change that, and that's what I tell them when I go into these classes. I'm like, you guys can fix this. You guys can make sure that there are no more Jenn Stergers. And a lot of it comes down to deciding whether you're going to take the money and take the bag and sell yourself out, or if you're going to make your own thing and you're going to stand on your own.
And we're in a generation where you can easily do that.
100%.
You could easily do that. So when did you get crossed over to actually hosting? Like, she's not just a face. We want to have her start talking.
I did a lot of that for Sports Illustrated. I did a lot of that with Sports Illustrated. I went from Sports Illustrated to ABC, ESPN to cover college hoops. And then the Jets came.
Yeah.
You know, that was kind of like my third gig in terms of like, I mean, there were others along the way that were just like one-offs, but those were like the big pillars, you know, in terms of like stepping stones in my career. So the Jets was, you know, my first chance at doing something on that scale. You know, it was live feedback from people in New Jersey, which is very honest. I respect it. I respect it. They'll tell you exactly what they're thinking of you right in the moment. But it was the biggest venue I'd ever worked in for sure.
And then when you got there, I remember in the documentary, they would kind of explain to you what you're going to do, but then they're like, nah, just go do it. By the way, that's hilarious. I laughed at that because that's influencing. They're like, they'll bring you up to this thing and they're like, yeah, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. And then you get there, you're like, yeah, just do your thing. Like, and then they're like, they give you nothing to work with. And now you have a security guard that's not even really a security guard.
But he was a good person.
Great
you know what
person.
I mean?
You can tell in the documentary, like, he has a good soul.
He's a real salt of the earth dude, you know? But even he, you know, he and I never spoke after I left the Jets, you know, because I'm sure he got fired too. And we lost touch. Honestly, I changed my phone number, but I texted him after the documentary and I was like, is this still your number? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, oh yeah. And I was just like, I really appreciate, it took a real man to step in front of that bus for me. You know? And that's who he was. He saw that I was just doing the best that I could under the circumstances that I was given. And we were talking the other day after he had seen the doc in its entirety, like at a screening. And he goes, you described your gig at the Jets so perfectly. He goes, because they'd give you your homework, you'd study, you're like, I'm gonna kill this. And then we'd get there and they'd be like, just kidding, throwing this all out the window. And then they'd be like, we're gonna put you in the stands with a bunch of drunk fans instead. And he was just like, the things that they had you do were absolutely insane, you know, for a woman of your size. He's like, you're not big, you know?
Were you ever, okay, so you're doing the whole, like, I'm in the crowd, I'm performing. At what point in the timeline did the whole guy come up to you and says, hey, Brett wants your number?
So it was like probably the last preseason game.
How long is that for me? For people that don't know football. Like,
Are you saying you don't know football?
none. not even a little bit.
I was gonna say I don't know to try and take it for you, but we both.
none. In fact, before I watched this documentary, I was like,
What is football?
I'm gonna do my due diligence. I called all of my football friends, people that are in the field, people that are out of the field.
This is why I moved to LA. Truly.
Because people we don't watch it out here?
No one cares. And everyone in entertainment's like, yeah, whatever. You know?
I just find it fascinating. Like, to me, it's cool that people love something so much, but when I watch this documentary, they made this guy a god. Like, it was 20 years they're in the slump, and then this dude that knows how to throw a football changes the whole town's energy. To me, that's very fascinating. I find it hilarious that a pope or like a preacher is wearing his gear as he's preaching the word of God, and yet they're putting that a little bit above. Like, it's fascinating. They definitely made him an idol. So I understand that if he did something wrong, that they're like, yeah, but it's, you know, it's Brett.
But it's our guy.
Yeah,
it's our guy. You know, and
I'll give my firstborn for that guy. Like, you know, like that's
Truly.
the energy that they were kind of giving
Truly.
out. So that must be very
Brett Favre
like.
could have hurled someone's baby into a canyon, and they'd have been like, "Oh my god, that's so sad." But did you see the spiral on that kid? Like, that's the leg.
You do that, maybe
that
pretty
guy's
far.
got a cannon. You know,
Jeez,
but
yeah.
it's. I think it goes to show you the power of sports and the power of storytelling, because the NFL and to his credit, his play gave the people of Green Bay who were hurting at the time in the sports field hope.
Yeah.
You know? And I think we all have those like parts of our life where, you know, we use other things as like a point of connection. For me, now it's comedy. But for so many people, especially with like their dads, like it's sports. You know, sports was a big part of my growing up because it was a way to connect with my dad. And so I think he's part of that to people. You know what I mean? Like, and the fact that they've kind of created this like folk hero thing around him, you know, adds to that mystique.
My only question, like, if I, not to play devil's advocate, but just an honest question, my question would be like, you guys never met though.
Never.
So how do you know if it's like a sleazeball friend of his that's just trying to get you to send nudes? Or
I didn't know. I didn't. And that's the thing. And that's why I tell people, like, I never met Brett Favre. The only reason that I assume that it's him is because of the voicemails. Because we didn't have the technology that we do now for like deep fakes and stuff like that.
True.
Those
Makes
voicemails, you know, and
very sloppy work, by the way. For you to be
Yeah.
using emails so like no one knows who you are and then throw a voicemail up
Right?
is wildly dumb.
bro,
Wildly dumb.
what's crazy is the pictures. Okay, again, I'm going to age myself in this, but not like in the 90s. So don't come for me like that. At the time, this was like 2008. And the pictures came through as T-mail. Do you know what T-mail is? T-mail, for those of you that don't know, is from a sidekick, which makes this story so much sadder. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's just elements of this. It's like the T-mail, the Crocs. Like, we can go so many directions with where this went wrong. And it's funny because, you know, fast forward to the whole story breaking and the scandal coming out 2 years later. I was trying to get out of it, and I was in really deep, and I just wanted it to end, and I wanted my job back. And I got contacted by Norm Macdonald, because Norm Macdonald had a sports show at the time on Comedy Central. And he was like, Jen, I want you to come on my show, and I want to do like a sketch about like old dudes and how they should text younger women. And it was this hilarious sketch that was purely Norm, you know, like it was super dark and funny. And
Which is crazy.
exactly. But my reps at the time were like, absolutely no. They were like, Jen, people already don't take you seriously as a victim. If you make fun of this, it's going to get even worse. They're going to look like you're just capitalizing off of it.
I mean, that's a fair point of view. But it's Norm.
Yeah, exactly. And Norm, to his credit, you know, when I told him, he was very understanding. When I told him I couldn't participate, he was very understanding. And he goes, but Jen, can I give you some advice? He goes, you seem like a good kid that's just caught up in a really bad situation. And he goes, the sooner you can own this, people can stop using it against you. He goes, the sooner you can take control of your story and take it back, he goes, that's when your whole life's going to come together. And so when you
During your
ask,
COVID moment where you're like reflecting over yourself, were you like thinking about
when
that?
he died,
Really?
yeah, when Norm passed, I was like, damn, you know?
Did you ever get to thank him for those advice?
Oh yeah, he stayed in touch. You know, he kept in touch, and it's just one of those moments where I tell people like, comedy literally saved me, because those were some dark moments. Two things: comedy saved me, and then during when the story came out, I was actually dating a normie. You know,
What?
a normie, a regular person.
Oh, I thought you meant. I thought you meant one of his family members.
No. You're like, is that a fan? No, sorry, dude. That is my bad. I didn't make the connection.
That's so funny.
Yeah, you definitely have it, by the way.
You hit me
Pattern
with
recognition
normie,
is
bro.
amazing.
Hey, she's not wrong. She's not wrong.
You're right.
But you know, I was dating a really good man, but he was not in the entertainment industry, and he was a Christian. He was a Mennonite. And
A Mennonite?
Yeah, a Mennonite. It's like Amish with technology.
A Mennonite. Mm-hmm. Sounds like a hard drive. I'm being so
But,
serious. Sounds like a hard drive.
but he was a good Christian guy, you know. And I was so lucky that I had someone that had my back, that didn't make the whole situation about him.
Love that.
You know what I mean? That was
Yeah.
just like a good support system. And I really think he was, you know, we ended up not, you know, working out, but I think at the time he was what I needed, you know? And there just became this point, because during the whole Favre thing, I also had a dear friend of mine pass away very suddenly, who had been helping me like do all my social media. So I had been very isolated in terms of like seeing the feedback people had about me. Like I was still getting it, but I wasn't getting it full bore because he was going into my
he was
socials.
filtering it.
He was filtering everything for me, you know?
Damn. So lose
And when
him
he
and then get
passed
added
away,
that.
yeah, when he passed away was when I got hit smack in the face with what everybody had been saying about me the whole time, you know?
Yeah.
And they had gotten it wrong, but they were just repeating a message to me that I already felt about myself, you know? Like, and the guy that I was seeing was just like, I think we should go to church. He's like, would you go with me? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if organized religion is for me. He goes, it doesn't have to be organized. It just has to be whatever your relationship is with God. Like that's you. That's for you. You know, it doesn't have to be like I align with everything that's happening in this room. You know what I mean? So, I went, and I really do feel like, you know, church became such a huge part of my life during it, you know, because I found this other community of people that during the darkest time of my life still loved me.
Thank God. Thank
Right?
God for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel about church now?
I still go from time to time, but I really think it's more about the individual relationship you have with God. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I don't think it has to be performative. I think it's more about how you live your life and how you treat other people. You know what I mean?
100%.
I think sometimes
I agree with you 100%.
I think sometimes people that are the loudest and people that are the most condemning of others without examining their own stuff are the people that are sitting in the front row of the church. And it's like we have to look at how we're living our life and how we're treating other people. That's where the real connection is, you know, with God.
Before Jesus is taken away, he turns to his disciples and he says, these are the two most important commandments. And if you do this, you will structure every law between us. And it's to love God with all of his heart and to love your neighbor as yourself. So church isn't a form of like when you go and you're doing your due diligence for God, like you're checking in with the king.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of pictured it growing up. But there's a power in community. As comics, we know that, right?
Yeah, for
if you
sure.
go, we get this writer, we get this promoter, we get this stage, and now this community just became something beautiful. Sadly, as a comic, we also know that there's certain people that come around and it just kind of taints the atmosphere of what we have.
100%.
And the laughter is a little bit bitter now. That also falls in the church category, but you shouldn't stray yourself away from it the same way that we're not going to walk away from like comedy because so-and-so and so-and-so. We're going to still be a part of community because we love it. That's how I see church. There's just people that will fill me up, man. Like there's a Bible verse that always screams out to me and it says, when two or more gather in my name, I'm present. And I don't think it's saying that when you're by yourself, I'm not with you. It's just kind of like when you need somebody that is really going to be there for you, not because he's trying to be a good person, but because he truly loves God and he loves his creation, Jenn. That person will fill you up a lot more than the comic or the producer or the people that are just trying to get something out of it rather than doing a commandment that God told them to do. So I would circle back into finding that type of community. Belle and I have been doing that, and it has significantly changed our life. Like the one thing that is significantly changed is finding a good church and keeping the Sabbath holy, like rest. And we've just been now loving God, loving our neighbor, and resting. And these three obstacles that we've been kind of working on made our work life so much easier, our social life so much easier.
And clearly your relationship incredibly strong.
It makes it stronger. So like, I know that guy, the Mennonite, might have not been a perfect for you, but you should definitely get involved with a community that loves you. Like truly,
for sure.
It will set you so free peacefully.
Yeah.
And I just kind of wanted to say that before we move on.
No, it's so true. And it's interesting because I actually told a joke the other night on stage about how no one was crueler to me during the entire situation than other women. And that was something that was really hard for me to digest because, you know, the same women that came out during Me Too to tell their stories were the people that stepped on my neck to get ahead when my situation happened. Like they wrote articles about me and things like that. Like I think one girl actually said, well, she must have done something to ask for this.
Damn.
You know, or I find it hard to believe, you know, but when Me Too happened, I just felt so left behind. And it really made me examine, I don't know, it really made me examine my relationships with other women and that kind of community. And so I've really prided myself, especially, you know, like you talked about with comedy and building the next generation and changing stuff. That's what I'm doing. You know, I work with multiple groups of comics out here, two that are all women and LGBTQ, and I help them tell their stories. And I really stress to them that there's enough room at the table. And if you are actively treating another woman poorly or another comic poorly, like, what is that? You know, I think it's getting curious, you know, because so many of us are walking around with wounds and just hurting other people.
Hurt people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I don't think women realize how much women-on-women violence we perpetuate against each other. Yeah. So when you're talking about, you know, on his last day here, he's like, you know, it's kind of how I feel when I gather with groups of women. I'm like, one of you bitches is about to betray me, you know? That's how I feel.
Yeah. The men are physical and the women are just like emotional towards each other. You know what I mean? Like, that's how we get back to each other. We don't like talk about things in person. It's the gossip. It's the
passive
backstabbing.
aggressiveness.
And guys are like, what's up? Let's just fight it right here, right now.
I
And
respect that.
Sometimes, you
Truly.
know, sometimes that's better.
Truly, I respect that. You know, I think women would act a lot differently if we thought there was a threat of violence. Like if we thought another girl would be like, "Hold up, sis. Like,
There's something like that.
What's up?"
I mean, let's just talk about this.
No, but you know, I am really proud of the work that I do in the comedy community to make sure that I'm not perpetuating the things that happened to me. Like, I don't think new comics should have to suffer what I went through. You know what I mean? I think we should always be looking for ways to make work environments a better place and cut out some of the struggle, because like life's hard enough, you know?
When did you see a future in comedy? When was it? Was it when you were working as a day host with the Jets? Was it Sports Illustrated? Did it come afterwards?
You know, it's so funny watching back my old footage because I am so cringe. You know what I mean? I am so cringe. I was an original influencer. I was so cringe, but I think I've always gravitated towards comedy. I was always the kid in class that said what everyone else in the room was thinking and then got in trouble for it. You know what I mean? Like, again, now there's a diagnosis for it. But I was always that funny kid. I was always the funny girl, you know? And I think when I dressed it all up and I put it in the Maxim FHM body, I feel like I did myself a huge disservice because that was what people focused on instead of what my actual gift was, you know?
Reality hits when the devil always shows up to give you another option rather than the one that God gave you.
There's a test.
Yeah.
It's all
a
test.
Take this one. Remember your boyfriend? He had the magazines.
Yeah.
Don't take this light where people are enjoying how you're speaking.
Yeah.
Go this way. If you could go back in time, though, would you change anything?
I think that's always a really hard question to answer, because if you change any event, you miss the lesson that came with that event. Yeah. And I think those lessons are the things that make us who we are. You know? I agree. And so are there decisions that I made that I regret? Absolutely. I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone that was like, no, I nailed this. Like, I nailed every step of life, you know? And I look at even my worst days and I go, yeah, but it got me here. And I am so proud of the person that I am and that I'm working to become constantly, because the work's never done. Like, we are never finished, you know? We are never finished until we are in the ground.
Yeah.
And so it's really just like my mission every day to like, how do I become better? How do I become of more service to others? That's a big part of who I am. And so, no, I think I've learned so much from even life's hardest moments.
Would you ever have an open conversation with Brett?
I don't think he would with me.
Have you ever tried to reach out?
No. And having seen the way his reps handled stuff when the actual incident was happening, I don't know that I want to. I wish him
But
well.
remember,
I
the
don't
reps,
wish him any harm.
The reps are always going to do. Remember, like your attorney said, don't have a conversation with him. And
Yeah.
your heart was like, no, I should. Is there any place in your heart that like, well, like I would sit down with him and give him his POV? Like, I'm not saying that he's not in the wrong or he is in the wrong. I don't know. I'm just saying, would you give him the opportunity to sit with you and say, Jenn, like, I've never met you. I don't know about this. I don't know about that. And hear his side of the story? Or do you think he's always just going to run away from it because he's like, I did do that and that was something I shouldn't have done?
That's the crazy thing is he denied all the welfare stuff. He's never denied what happened to me. You know?
Do you believe he did the welfare stuff?
I mean, I believe that he sent a text message that says, hey, is there any way that this can trace back to me? Which, whether or not he did it, that's a bad look. It's a bad look
that question,
to ask
like,
somebody.
what is that? Well, look, okay, so I saw that in the documentary. Did he say in a way where he was like, yo, we're trying to get, like, I'm not going to get caught for this? Or is he saying it in a way, it's like, hey, is this legal? Are we doing something that's wrong?
Oh, no. He said, is there any way people can find out?
Oh, yeah, no, that's not
Gotcha,
great. That's not
yeah.
great. That's not
Is there
great.
any way people can find out where this money's from? Which is very different than
That's
like,
not
hey,
okay.
is
Yeah,
this on
yeah,
the
yeah,
level?
yeah,
Right. Is this
You know what I
right?
mean? Yeah, no. Those are two very different questions.
Yeah, and also it's just, it's Robin Hood never got looked at as a bad guy because he stole from the rich to give to the poor. He was taking from the poor to give to the rich. And to me, it's like, that's a really bad look. And it's a sad way to throw a legacy that you worked so hard for. When I was watching the documentary that you guys have on Netflix, I can't help but to realize that his spinning downwards was right after his father passed away.
Yeah.
And,
And truly, that's kind of the takeaway that I had from it as well. Is I think sometimes what happens is when people who were a big part of how our nervous systems were built, when they leave us, it's like those patterns are still there. Those feelings that they left us with are still there. And if you have any kind of unfinished business with somebody, like, you take that and you have to reconcile that for yourself. And I think there's so many of us that are just not capable of processing grief because we've never been taught how. We've never been taught how to forgive people who've hurt us. You know, even like the closest to us, like our caretakers. And I saw that moment in the film, much like you did, I think, where I was like, oh, I see why this person became the way they did.
also, it's not even his character has died, his athletic abilities died.
Well,
The
buddy,
thing that he
time
loved.
comes for us all, okay? You're going to
You think-
wake up one day and
hey,
everything's
hey.
going to hurt, okay? Everything's
I'm
going to
playing
hurt.
with God.
I think it's the same way of like, you know, when you don't know how to deal with whatever is happening to you in front of you, right? You kind of shove it to the side, you put it underneath the rug. And so in a sense, you put blinders on. And when you have these blinders on in life, then you kind of like your sense of empathy for people, it kind of goes away, right? And you're like, well, this is business and this is going to be good for my career and this is going to be good for money later. And you stop to think about all the things that could be affecting other people around you because you don't know how to handle your hurt. So you don't care if you hurt other people,
Yeah.
you know?
Exactly.
Also, it's like, remember, we're all sheep. So, like, I don't care how squeaky clean you and I are, right? If we start hanging out with ISIS every day, I'm being serious. At some point, even that we're squeaky clean, we're good people, we're going to start doing things that our old selves would be like, no, what are you doing? You can't do that. Whatever your surroundings are, every human being is like a sheep. And that's why the gospel is like, you guys are all sheep and you need a shepherd. And we
Yeah.
all hang out and we all become what we're around. If his dad was filling him in with garbage, if his coaches was filling him up with garbage, if he was this kid from the South that just loved playing football, and then everybody for decades was praising him like he's almighty God, I think that in his realm, he might have done a better job than maybe even I would have done if I was in that predicament and worshipped like that. So I don't like to throw stones because I don't know how somebody's going to react when they act. It's kind of like when they judged you for doing the decisions that you did, but we probably think to ourselves, you probably would have done worse than what I would have done.
And
so
that's what I look at too, is I'm very good at looking at someone and what they've been through and being like, I see how you got here.
yes,
I see how you got here. I see how you found yourself in this predicament.
hate the sin, not the human.
But the problem with that for me is I have always seen that and then allowed people to keep hurting me.
Yeah, that's a
You
problem.
know, and I think there's a line that we have to draw where
Yep.
we go, hey, like, what is this? What does this action mean? What were you trying to accomplish? This has caused actual harm to me,
Yeah.
you know? And in terms of like sitting down with him, like if someone asked me to, I would.
Who would have to ask you for you to say yes? Like him or like Netflix and saying, hey, like, we want you to sit down at a conversation?
No.
Would you want it on camera or off camera? How
Off
would
camera.
You just want to
it's
talk
not
to him as a human.
performative. It's
Yeah.
just the same way I did with AJ. I met AJ at House of Pies. I was crying at House of Pies because he was telling me things from the story and from the time that was really painful in my life from his perspective, and from, you know, like from a different perspective of what the NFL was doing at the time, et cetera. And he gave me a lot of pieces of missing information that I didn't have. But I just remember like sitting there and being like, in tears, thinking, oh, people probably think he's breaking up with me.
Hilarious.
But for real, I think AJ and I met for ourselves. We didn't meet for cameras, you know what I mean? And that's the thing, is like, as much as people would love to see that, I think there's so much power into people doing that for themselves, you know?
I just find it so fascinating that you guys have the whole world speaking about your relationship.
That didn't exist.
That didn't even, like, you guys don't even know each other.
We don't.
To me, it's like, I had, you know, instance with like close friends of mine, like for example, Logan, and then I'll see how the internet goes about it.
Isn't it crazy the narratives people create?
It's funny how they could really run with something,
Yeah.
and believe it or not believe it, but you guys didn't even meet. So it's like in your mind, do you ever look at the articles and be like, yeah, I wonder if that's true too? Because like you're also kind of like a viewer of this whole situation.
I'm a viewer. I was a receiver of like third-party information because I'd be told, you know, like I said, from his reps, from his reps to my reps to me, and it's like this game of telephone. And it's like, at some point, you just want to sit across from the person and go, hey, what happened? Why did you do what you did? It caused me a lot of pain. And I think the hardest part when you do something like that, though, is being okay if the other person's not willing to own their part of it.
That's
because
tough,
they don't
though.
have the capacity for it.
That's tough to
And I think
see.
that might be what's happening, you know, is he doesn't have the capacity. Because I think it would mean him acknowledging that he did stuff wrong. And when people don't call you on your shit, when you don't have a shepherd to tell you, hey, you're going the wrong way, I think it's so much harder to own your mistakes because you think you have to be perfect.
There's two men on earth. There's the one who acknowledges God and then the one who is God.
Yes.
That's it. It's either you're acknowledging who God is or you are God.
Yeah.
And some people know that they're not God, so they try to kill God. And sometimes you have to kill moral standpoints and become this character that you supposedly believe that you are. I mean, they gave him a throne, bro. Like, when I watch back that documentary, it's just like I've seen very, very humble, meek human beings just get $1 million and they're just different. And so when I'm seeing that they gave him a throne, it's a throne. That's like very different. When you have the president of the United States coming to meet you and talk to you about what's going on, like, to me, it's like it has to get to your head. If you wake up every single day and somebody's like, man, kiss my baby, please. Like every day of your life, at some point, I think you're going to have the audacity to tell somebody, hey, go tell that girl over there that I want her. Oh, she doesn't want me? Get me her number. I'll figure this out. And then so in his mind, he doesn't see it as wrong. He might even see it as, I'm doing you a favor. I'm Brett. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just a perspective thing, and it's.
I did ask him in text message or whoever was on the other end of the phone again, because you don't know when you've never met somebody. But I asked the person, I was like, why won't you leave me alone? Like, why me? And the person said, because I want what everybody else wants and can't have.
Kings say that.
Pride.
Sounds Game of Thrones-ish.
It really does.
Is he a Lannister?
That's a very Lannister move.
Well, not all Lannisters.
Yes.
Well, in this case, tell Cersei it was me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Nice.
Did his wife ever try to reach out?
No.
No. Wait, did she ever say anything publicly about any of
Who
this?
could blame her? Like, she is one of those people that I genuinely feel sorry for.
Yeah.
You know, they talk about it a little bit in the film. At one point, she was battling breast cancer.
They wanted the guy to write that he was a family guy.
Wasn't that one of the craziest quotes in the entire doc?
Dog, when he said that and he goes, I don't write nonfiction.
Fiction. He goes, I don't
Yeah.
write fiction.
I don't
Yeah.
write fiction, so I
Yeah,
don't
the
know.
guy wrote, I don't write fiction because they wanted him to write an article about Brett Favre being a family guy.
That's crazy.
And it's like, that was one of the things that AJ said when we met was he goes, everybody knew what was happening to you. They just didn't care.
I mean, bro, no disrespect to you. Till this day.
Yeah.
I'll call my football friends and be like, yeah, but it's Brett. Like that. And I'm like, wow. Like, it's a shield of layer of protection. Do you think he would have gotten the same thing if he was black?
Oh,
Do you think he would have gotten away with all the stuff that he did with you?
No.
And with the
no,
company?
if we're going to really have this conversation, no. And it's something that they left out of the documentary that I talked to them about. And that was the only active players that defended me were black players.
Michael Vick's in the doc.
He's in the doc, and people were like, that just seems like such a choice because Michael Vick
It was a choice,
because
dude. It
Michael
was a
Vick had his
choice.
stuff, but it's not a choice. It's who's willing to talk.
Yeah, fair
And
enough.
at the end of the day, you know,
I bet he was bitter as hell, though. He's like, damn, bro. He's
Michael
like,
Vick, with all of the things he did, and I say this as a person who works in animal rescue, I say this as an animal advocate. I do believe he is remorseful for what he did, you know, with the dog fighting. I do believe that. He served 5 years in prison,
Oh,
you
wow.
know?
I don't even know about what happened to this guy.
Yeah, Michael Vick?
No,
What?
I don't know, dude.
Yo, could you tell her about Michael Vick?
So, Cliff Notes.
Here's
Michael
that.
Vick was an active player in the NFL. He was caught in running a dog fighting ring.
Imagine Tommy. You would pay money to bring him in and be like, my dog will mess your dog up.
Yeah.
And your dog might not come out alive from it.
Oh my
Tommy would just
gosh.
hump somebody's leg and love them to
Yeah.
death.
So he had
I'm
like
a lover, not a fighter.
he had like backyard boogies with dogs.
Yes.
Well, that's so odd. Sorry. That's so weird.
But he, you know, there were dogs.
By the
were
way,
dying.
why? By the way, why? That's the only question I'd ever ask him. I'll be like, my dog. Why?
Why?
You're an NFL football and you're crushing
I think
it.
when people don't
you-
tell you no, and it's like, and it's so
Why?
fun. It's not just that. It's when people don't tell you no, and then you get to a certain level where you just get so bored that like you lose perspective in like harming other people for your and things and living things for your own entertainment.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're like jaded to like, you're like, I've done cool things, fun things, great things. Now I need something a little crazy.
Yeah.
Almost. But that's just like, to me, it's like, who even introduced you to that idea that you're like, this is a great idea? And
I
then
bet he was at
got-
a park and he saw two dogs fighting, and the owner's like, "No, stop!" And he's like, "Wait, let's
We can
see what happens
monetize
here.
this."
Let's see what happens here."
Yeah. No, but it's so it.
I make jokes because I'm uncomfortable.
Oh no, it's dude, that's how I've dealt with my whole life. People are like, you're so inappropriate, and I'm like, it is a coping strategy.
Yeah, no, I do.
I
I
do
do it
not-
at funerals all the time, and it's so bad. It's so bad. It's so bad.
Oh man, the number of times my friends call me a professional moment ruiner.
Yes.
So yes,
They'll be weeping, and I'll just lean in. I'm like, imagine.
I'm
and
that
like,
way.
I'll say
I'm
something
that
like-
way too. But I think the difference is, you and I still know how to express vulnerability.
Yeah.
I think when it becomes the only coping strategy you have, and you're not willing to be vulnerable, that's when humor is not a good
Yeah.
thing. It's just a coping strategy.
You're
you know what I mean?
overdosing on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
You're
feel that.
hiding from who you are, you know?
So, did you know that Michael Vick was going to be in this documentary? And did you talk to him at all?
No. I don't know him.
Got it. So this dude just randomly put his name on the line to defend you. And you did you reach out and say, "Hey, thanks
I
for this"?
personally think they reached out to a lot of people, and most people who are even retired players in the NFL don't want to come out against the Shield, because if they come out against the Shield, it's like you're still making money off their likeness in their retirement. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like a fraternity where you're like, we have our secrets, you know, and we're not going to sell out one of our own.
Yeah.
And it's like, where are the real men that are willing to put themselves on the line? I think that's why it's so important that men have community, that men have their own community, because a woman being in the room instantly changes the entire dynamic. But when men can sit with other men and be like, and hold each other accountable, those are like the men that I want to be
Those
around.
are true leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah. True leaders, you know, there was a comments that were coming after me in the earlier this year, and they were like, he's so emotional. He's so emotional. And it's like, well, everybody deals with something with emotion, and I just choose to deal with love. Like, I don't sit here and try to get angry or bitter.
When did we villainize emotion?
You know, they try to because there's this...
It's because they're uncomfortable with
It's
it.
an agenda to make everybody numb. And I just won't do it. I just love life. I love enjoying. I love making people laugh and asking questions like, circling back, do you think he would have gotten away with it if he was black?
You're going to make me answer this.
I just want to know.
No, I don't. You know, and it's something that I talked about in the film. And that's honestly what I think Michael Vick was there for, you know, was to address that element of it. You know, people, you know, black athletes have been banned from the NFL for things much smaller than that. You know, just for basically for taking a knee, for having principles, you know? So yeah, I do think I don't think he would have gotten away with it if he was black.
That's crazy.
And from all of the athletes that I spoke to that, you know, reached out and were in my corner, they agree.
Really?
Yeah. They're not willing to put their name on the line for it. No one's willing to actually say it publicly because that would mean selling out a brother. That would mean selling out somebody that's in their frat, you know?
Yeah.
But like I said, I think men need other men to hold them accountable. And you need men like that in your life if you're a man. And that's why, like, I think men should have men's groups. I think men should have community because women have that. We have that. Like if think about it, when you're upset, like who do you run to?
Of course, yeah.
Your girlfriends, you know? And we're able to be vulnerable and we're able to be emotional and vent and do all of the things and seek solace. And men don't have that. Again, because why are you so emotional?
Yeah.
You know? It's
I
like
think
it's
it just
been,
needs to take some type of men to stand up. It's like, what do you fear? This is a quote that I run with now. Whatever you run to in your crisis is where your Christ is. And so when people get scared
good.
of losing their job, or they get scared of losing their promotion, or they get scared of all this stuff, they start worshiping what they fear. And that's why God says, fear the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So when I'm sitting courtside and somebody I look up to says something like, yeah, but that guy ratted out that he was cheating on somebody with so-and-so's wife. He goes, no, I'll never do work with him. And I was like, wait, you're not going to work with a guy who has integrity and doesn't want to go with a lie, but you would rather go and do business with a man who cheats on his wife? Like
got
a man
news
who
for you.
cheats on his wife
is gonna do it to you because that's the person that's the closest to
Dog,
him.
I think about this all the time. It's like, bro, like the only reason you're backing his stupidity is because you want the past to be stupid too. And I'm not going to sit on your guys' moral compass. Like, no, I'm not going to sit here and think it's okay that this guy cheats on his wife and then wants to break bread with me. So what, I could take your nonsense and then divide it with my wife? I'm okay. Yeah. I'm fine with that. And I think now because of the echo chambers of social media, if there's a lot of people that agree. I mean, listen, bro, if I post an ad right now being like, yo, I love sock bunnies. Every Tuesday, we're going to meet up at Costco and play with sock bunnies. There would be a bunch of weirdos that come with their socks and ready to play bunnies, right? So in my mind, I'm like, okay, if there's enough people that will agree with me on the things that I find true, then I'm just going to speak what I believe and then have my own company that I believe I should be around me.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
No, it makes all the sense in the world. You don't alter who you are to chase other people's admiration. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The only time I change myself is to try to be better.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, again, that's what I said. And it's like the one thing that I look back on. And I know that you'd said like, you don't judge people, don't judge yourselves for your mistakes. And I think that is the thing that I still have to learn here is I'm so good at giving grace to other people that I really struggle with giving grace to myself when I mess up.
Then I will say this one line to you, and I pray it stays with you. Jesus didn't say love your neighbor more than yourself. He says love your neighbor as you love yourself. The reason why is because if you can't love yourself, you won't be fully able to love everybody else. Yeah. And if you can't give grace to somebody else, and you can't give grace to you, then there's going to be times where you overflow and you just. And when I used to behave this way, I'll be good, and then when I lose my mind, it's like, yo, I'm ready to risk everything for my emotions.
Burn it down.
And yes, no, for real. And that just meant that I
Dracarys.
was not good at like dealing with my emotions.
Yeah.
Once I figured out that I should love myself first, and it's not selfish to say that, to love myself first, so then I could love Reed and I could love Belle. But some people, they just don't know how to look inside and say, yeah, man, I really hate who I used to be. And I also say that Jesus also made it very clear that your old self dies and you should go with the renewing of your mind. These words start popping out when you start realizing they have a lot of weight to them.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, yeah, it's okay for me to think that that person was cringe. I always tell people, look, if you're not looking at your old material and cringing, that means you're not growing. You shouldn't be proud of that. You should be proud that when you look at something that you did even 6 months ago, you're like, oh, I could do it so much better. Good. If you look at something from 2008 and you're like, loved it. Like, you're like my man, you're not on the right path, dude.
The eyebrows were perfect. The eyebrows were great. No notes. No, for sure.
So what's the journey look like now, Jenn? You have your voice, you have the media, you have everybody kind of now peeking back the curtain and saying, oh, this poor girl was misunderstood and robbed of all the opportunities that she had in front of her. What's the goal out of this documentary besides just sharing your side of the story? Is there a dream you see that you're like, okay, cool, now I want to go and hit this stage or do this thing with my life?
You know, I think I had to let old versions of me die. And I think that's a big part of why I did the documentary, is because I need this story to go away and I need people to stop reminding me of it so that I can move on. Because people would be like, why are you still talking about this? And I'm like, because you guys won't let me move on. Imagine every day someone brought up the worst thing you've ever done, the thing that brought you so much shame, the thing that you were involved in that caused you so much embarrassment, the worst day of your life, any of those things. Even if it was done to you, there's still so much shame attached to it, you know? And I really want to put these other versions of me to bed and show people the work that I've done on myself for the last decade. 15 years. The last 15 years. Holy crap. It's been such a long time, you know? And I've been so many different versions of myself. And I want people to meet this one, you know? I want them to meet the one that's grown from all these experiences and become a better person as a result of it, you know? And I want them to see my comedy.
I was going to say, dude, you should Chris Rock this whole situation. Like, when he got slapped, I was like, ooh. And then he went on a tour and sold out everything, and he had a great bit about his learning curves from it. And to me, it was like, that's a true gentleman right there.
Yeah.
Like, somebody who doesn't go out to war or go out to sue or go out to complain, but he makes joke, lighthearted, turns the point of view on it. I think that was a phenomenal approach.
You know why I couldn't do that for a long time?
Are you going to say because you're a girl?
No.
Because I am a woman. And I'm like, oh, here we go. We're going to open up a whole other door.
No, true story. And this is a little deep comedy-wise. I couldn't do that because I was still sad. I was still hurt. I still felt left behind, you know? And my comedy voice, I know where my comedy voice comes. My comedy voice comes from when I'm super annoyed. And when I'm like, can you believe this? Like, that's where my comedy voice lies, is in that anger. And for a long time, I couldn't get angry because my nervous system was like broken from all this like trauma. And people will be like, it's just a picture. That's not what the trauma was. The trauma was having my entire industry gaslight me and tell me what happened to me didn't happen, and what happened to me didn't matter, and I didn't matter. And then having everybody else on the internet say, yeah, you don't matter. What happened to you don't matter. Look at you. You deserved it.
Yeah.
And so I walked around with that for 10 years, you know, and it's just, like I said, since 2020 when I've really like examined all of this stuff that's happened to me.
You know what you're dealing with is like the worst thing an entertainer could go through. Imagine all you want to do is make people laugh, you want to entertain them, and you set up this mask of a new identity, and then they all start running with this one written narrative that has nothing to do with your life. And now they're like, this is what we base you off of. You're nothing more, you're nothing less.
The internet told me who I was before I had a chance to discover it for myself.
And then, can I ask you something? What gave you the strength to keep moving as an entertainer? Because that's nauseating.
Comedy.
You just want to laugh it off.
Comedy. Because I was like, Jenn, you are a storyteller, you know, and we're going to get through this like a storyteller would. Because we stop telling our stories for ourselves and we start telling our stories to help other people. And that's another reason why I did this doc, is because for a long time I thought what happened to me was so absurd and so unrelatable and just like there's no way anyone will ever empathize and understand what I went through. And the fact of the matter is there are so many people out there that have been through similar situations, and they don't have this platform to do this on. And so this is for them. These are for the people that can't confront their boss. This is for the lady that got laid off because she dared to report somebody to HR. You know, this is for all the victims out there. Because I think also, you know, one of the ways Me Too got it wrong is it became a man versus woman issue.
Yeah, it was a witch hunt.
And not a survivors versus the systems of power that did this. You know, because that's all this story is really about, is people abusing power, people not hearing the word no and taking it, you know? And so I think that there became this almost like backlash against Me Too, you know, specifically from men, because they were like, but what about us? You know, it's a proven fact that like one out of four women were abused by the time they were an adolescent. It's 1 out of 6 men. Imagine there's that many men out there that are like, well, no one gave a shit when it happened to me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, be tough.
Be tough.
Yeah, rub
be
dirt
a
in
man.
it type of thing.
Be
Yeah,
a man.
that's even worse.
So I'm like, you know what? You be vulnerable. You cry. You do whatever you want to do. You know what I mean? Like,
Imagine I'm like, all right, I got it.
Thank you so much.
So how are you feeling now? Like, so, you know, the documentary just came out this week, right? Now you're getting all the feedback from everybody. I'm sure positive, I'm sure some negative. Do you feel a weight lifted off of you? Do you feel like this is like the last block and now you can finally move on?
The response has been very different, you know? And I think that shows that as divided as we feel right now as a country, that there's still this like want for connection and want to be seen. And like we're all much more similar than we give ourselves credit for, you know? As much as people want to divide us, I think our values are very aligned, where it's like, don't hurt the vulnerable. Like, I don't think there's people out there that are actively rooting for people to be hurt, you know? And if they are, like, hey, what's that? What's wrong with asking, hey, what's that? What's that about? Like, that's how you meet people. You know, I got to see, I think you were there that night. We got to see Chappelle that night at the upstairs. And
Wild,
right?
I think about it all the time.
Insane. But he made such a beautiful point about not throwing away the whole person just because you disagree with them.
I want to talk about, you're talking about
Kanye.
Yeah. I didn't want to, dude, that story touched me so much. I told everybody that I know about it, but I didn't talk about it on the podcast because it was such a personal thing that I was like, I don't want to be caught like telling his personal story to the world. But look, that changed my perspective a lot.
And look, we should still let him be the one to tell it, because we are not Dave Chappelle. And like,
and by the way, we'll butcher it. We'll butcher it.
We'll butcher it. Yeah, exactly. Because what I found so interesting that night is he's such a poignant storyteller, regardless of how you feel about some of his previous material. He always makes you realize, like, it's not coming from a place of hate. It's coming from a place of, like, silly and of like a violation. Like it's always, that's what comedy is. It's social violations, and then us going, oops.
Yeah.
You know? And I think where people get a little weird is when we don't admit there was a social violation, or we don't make the audience feel safe enough to do so.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And he was so masterful at how he did that. He's an amazing storyteller. And he took you through that whole journey with obviously with all the anti-Semitic stuff that Kanye has said, and you know, his run-in with him post SNL, and he really just gave you a full picture of who he is, and that's kind of what this documentary did for me in terms of Brett Favre.
Yeah,
it's like I saw the whole person, you know, and I think the one thing that he didn't touch on was some of his addiction issues, and I really do feel like that should have been included, but it's just an hour. You can only hold people's attention so long when it's not about them.
And it held our attention.
Great.
Yeah, it was great.
But I think when you can really look at where somebody comes from, you can stop alienating them and realizing, like, hey, like, this is where we lost this person. How do we bring them back into the fold? How do we get them back into the herd? You know, how do we bring them back?
We bring the 1 to the 99.
Yeah.
That's powerful. It's a freeing position to be when you're not in judgment. also not to bring up scripture, but it's true. He says, don't judge, so then that way you're not judged. And the day that I like really took into accountability of like gossiping is a very bad thing. And it's so natural and it's so much fun. And the day that I started holding my tongue accountable with that, like, hey, cut that out. Like, it's not a good thing. We're not killing them, but we're killing their character. And then we're writing it off as if it's a joke.
Yeah.
But it's true just bitterness or jealousness. And the day that I stopped really doing that, and I really at least tried to, like, focusing on it, bro, I stopped judging myself as much.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay, it goes back and forth. So whatever you're doing to your neighbor, you're going to do to yourself.
And listen, gossip is just a bid for connection.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's just you being like,
You agree too, right?
I have nothing to add in this. So what can we bond over? Oh, our hatred for another person. You know what I mean? Like,
No, it's so true. So true. Certainly girls, like
girls
we
are the
both don't like that
worst.
one girl, right? Okay.
Girls are the worst, and that's the thing is I'm really trying, much like you, to hold people accountable when it comes to that stuff, and to hold myself accountable and be like, don't engage in that. I always say, I'm not going to say something if I wouldn't say it to that person's face.
These are all learning curves that takes people their whole life, and you were put in a position to have to learn it right now.
It was a lot.
That's cool, man.
It was a lot. You're looking at the evolution of the last 15 years, and it's been a lot of work on myself, a lot of therapy, because I think staying curious about who you are and how to be better is just vital. Again, if you don't look at 2008 you and cringe, you're not growing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what your future holds.
Me too, man.
Can't wait to see your jokes.
I want my Chris Rock moment,
Yeah.
I want my moment where I take something that happened to me and I make it funny and I make it poignant for everybody else, Because I love saying something with my comedy. It's not just dumb jokes. Like I truly like having a message with it.
There was something that changed my life, like, significantly as a comic. I was watching Dave Chappelle, and I'm like, this guy's not even really setting up jokes. He's just really funny. Yeah. Like, he's just telling stories, and he's just really funny. And the next day, I saw a meme. It's so funny I'm saying this, but this meme changed my life. And it said, funny people don't tell jokes. They just talk, and they're funny.
Yeah.
And I realized all the times that I've been cringe is when I'm, like, trying to make somebody laugh and trying to make them, like...
Don't press, man.
Yeah. Oh, I press.
Don't press.
I press. I
She's
press.
like, yeah, he does.
Yeah, I press. What?
I didn't say that.
I didn't say that. You get it between us?
Did you see how he got, what? What did you say? It's like, she?
Babe.
She always tells me, she goes, you press too much, dude. Like, chill. Just chill back. And then she lights a J and she, like, hangs back.
You guys are so adorable.
Yeah, we're the best.
You are.
Dude, thank you so much for coming and hanging out. I know this might be such an uncomfortable thing to, like, sit and talk about, but we really find it, like, an awesome thing to do, to sit here and, like, get to know your POV of everything that's going on.
No, and you do such a good job of this and having a conversation and making it about a bigger thing versus, like, the thing that everybody else wants to ask about, which is just a 40-year-old man's thing. You know what I mean? Like,
well, that's actually my landing question.
But I just wanted to say, thank you for sitting down and opening up to us, trusting us with this. And I really hope that, this week goes smoothly for you and you have a lot of peace.
And if it doesn't go smooth, it's fine. I hope that this is helping other people, But thank you guys for having me, truly. I love what you guys are doing with helping people tell their stories,
I appreciate
and
it.
reminding people of the bigger picture and what we're here to do, and that's serve.
Yep. Amen. Is there anything that they should be catching you on? Or?
Oh yeah, please. I have a podcast where I talk about a lot of mental health stuff and a lot of the personal development things that I do besides comedy, obviously, with my buddy Eddie Pence, who's another comic.
Nice.
And it's called Not Today. It's supposed to be Not Today Satan, and believe it or not, the algorithm was like shutting down because of the word Satan. So it's just Not Today.
Okay.
And it's like
That's so funny. Literally, Not Today, Satan.
yeah, literally it was the name of the podcast is Not Today Satan, and it's because we all have those things that come up in our life that we're just like, oh, not today, not today. I'm not going to fail this test, and so that's my podcast. If you can check that out, it's Not Today with Eddie Pence and Jenn Sterger. And
what about some comic stuff?
Check me out. I'm going to start touring again in the fall, possibly a little bit over the summer. So you can just check out my website. It has or my bio on my Instagram, and that has all the information.
Cool. We'll throw that in the description.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, awesome.
Amazing,
Dude, thanks for sitting with us.
Thanks so much.
It was such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Love you, bud.
Thank you.